A very pleasant good afternoon to all of our viewers. We want to welcome you to another edition of Let's Talk. We are delighted that you have chosen to be with us. And for our session this afternoon, we are continuing our discussion, a very important discussion we started 2 weeks ago. We have been dealing with the topic of NCDs, non-communicable diseases, and the Christian's response to this. We are discussing this because this has become a real issue in our world today. And as members of God's church, we are not immune to it. It is something that governments, that various nations have been seeking to address because it is creating a toll on the financial sector of government, not least to say the health institutions are burdened because of the number of non-communicable diseases and the state of challenge that it is creating, it is causing. We started discussing diabetes, then we looked at hypertension and kidney issues, and today we're going to be talking to the issue of obesity, a very important subject. Before we do so, however, and before I introduce our guests, I want to invite you to have a word of prayer with us. Father, be with us as we go into today's discussion. We ask for your wisdom and your guidance. Take full control. Grant us your peace and your grace in Jesus' name. Amen. Mm-hmm. Well, today we have, again, we have back with us Dr. Monica Stevens, and we have our nutritionist, Miss Dublin, Charity Dublin, and joining us for the first time to deal especially with aspects of childhood obesity, we have Dr. Belle Jarvis. Dr. Jarvis is the head of the pediatric department at the Mount St. John Medical Center. We are delighted to have you with us. It's not the first time that you are on Let's Talk, but welcome back, Dr. Jarvis. It's a delight to have you with us.
Thank you so much, and greetings to your viewing and listening audience.
And to the rest of our guests this afternoon, Ms. Dublin, it's a delight as always to have you. And Dr. Stevens, welcome just the same. I want to jump right into our discussion for today. We are discussing the problem of obesity. And from all reports, it is an increasing problem in the world, and perhaps I could say especially in our region. But I want to begin by first clarifying some terms. You know, I have heard people talk about obesity, I've heard them talk about overweight. How does one know his or her ideal weight? What is the distinction between obesity and overweight? And how do I know if I am obese as opposed to if I am overweight? How do I know how do I check my real weight? I don't know which one of you wants to respond to that question.
Okay. I'll start. Excellent question to start with, Pastor. Thank you for that. WHO, that's the World Health Organization, defined obesity and overweight as the excessive accumulation of body fat that puts the individual at health risk. And so one of the main ways in which we can determine whether a patient is underweight, overweight, or obese is by using a simple tool called the BMI, or the Body Mass Index. It is not a perfect tool, but it helps us very much in putting a patient in these categories. So the BMI is calculated by your weight in kilograms divided by your height in meters squared. Well, don't worry about it if you're not mathematically inclined. What you can do, just go to Google and type in calculate my BMI. A calculator will come up and you could just add in your weight and your height and it's going to give you that figure. And when you get that number, you place yourself in a particular classification according to the World Health Organization. So if you get 18 or below, it means that you are underweight. Between 18 and 25, you are normal weight. Between 25 and 30, you're therefore overweight. And beyond 30, it's considered obesity. And it's further broken down in class 1, class 2, or class 3. So your class 1 obesity, if you're between 30 to 35, and then between 35 and 40, you're considered class 2 obesity, and greater than 40, that's class 3 obesity. As I said, it's not a precise exact science, but it helps us very well. And if you get a BMI that you think, oh, that does not match me, don't be alarmed. It's important that you check with your family medicine physician so that they could guide you, because you may have some persons who are very muscular, for example, and their BMI might come out to be overweight when that person is thinking that I'm not overweight, so what's going on here? Another thing we can use, I'm sure almost everyone has a tape measure at home. If you get a tape measure and you measure your waist, the smallest parts of your waistline, that will be just above your umbilicus or your belly button. And if you are a male and you get above 40 inches, it means that you are obese. If you get, as a female, it's over 35, it means that there's definitely cause for concern. So those are the guidelines that we use to determine whether persons are overweight or obese.
So Dr. Stevens, while you were talking there, indicating that you could go to Google and do that, I took the opportunity to go to Google, and put in my weight and my height, and what I noticed is that they show you what is underweight, what is overweight. By the way, they say that my body mass index is normal. So
very good.
That's a good report.
Yes.
But I was just wondering if you would, again, just for the sake of our listeners who may not be close to Google right now, well, if they're listening, they probably are, but could you just repeat the categories again for them? Okay,
so normal weight would, underweight will be less than 18, okay? And a normal weight, a normal healthy adult between the ages of between 20 and above, that's who it's calculated for. If you're normal BMI, then you'll be between 18 to 25. Now, between 25 to 30, that's overweight, and above 30 is considered obese. And obese, is broken down into 3 categories. Class 1 obesity is between 30 to 35. Between 35 and 40, you have class 2, and anything above 40 will give you your class 3 obesity.
Okay, that is very useful information. So everybody listening at home can, once they know their weight and their height, they can check their body mass index with the help of Google, and it does tell you which category you fall into. Now that's very interesting. Is obesity a disease?
The short answer to that is yes, it is. It is definitely a disease, but it's not just a disease. It is considered a complex disease. And why it's considered a complex disease is because it increases the risk of many other diseases. So Pastor, all those NCDs that we spoke about before, for example, diabetes, if you are obese, it increases the risk of you having diabetes. If you are obese, it increases the risk of you having hypertension. And the others that we're going to talk about, like heart disease, once you're obese, it increases your chance of getting those NCDs. So that's why it's considered a complex disease. But definitely, it is a disease in and of itself.
Now that's very interesting, because my understanding is that obesity is a prevalent problem across all age groups. Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about childhood obesity in a while, but Is it that the situation is changing for worse, or is it that we are only now taking notice of a problem that always existed? Because, you know, when I listen to the news, in fact, last week, I heard a report from on BBC, I believe it was from the WHO, that said that in another few years, 1/3 of the world's population will be obese. And when I heard that, I kind of sat up and I said, "This is madness. 1/3. That's a huge number."
Mm-hmm.
Is it that we are now becoming more health conscious, or that was a problem that is always existed, and or is it that our habits have changed, our eating habits have changed, or, you know, are things getting worse? That's what I'm trying to figure out here.
Mm-hmm. Well, things are definitely getting worse. You're not imagining that at all, because as of 2022, March 2022, WHO reported that there's 1 billion, and I repeat, 1 billion, that's not an error, 1 billion persons worldwide who are obese, about 650 million adults and 340 million adolescents, and about 39 million children. And the number is increasing. If we compare that to, for example, in the 1960s and 1970s, it was much lower. If we transcribe that in percentage-wise, it's about 40% of the population today, well, as of 2022. But back in 1980, it was about 13.4%. And then in 2008, it rose to 34.3%. So think about it, from 2008, where we had 34.3%, to last year, we have about 40%. So that is a significant rise. And the WHO predicts that it will get worse in the next couple of years.
Well, I know Dr. Jarvis is on, and our nutritionist, Miss Charity Dublin, is on. I kind of want to hear from you in terms of I want to hear from the nutritionist with respect to, are eating habits changing, and is this impacting our weight?
Fantastic question. So I'm sure if we'd all just take a bit of time to think back, whether it is about how our grandparents ate, how we ate when we were younger, we would note that there is something that in the nutrition world we refer to as a nutrition transition. So this is something that we notice has taken place. And what we see is that there is a shift away from traditional cultural Caribbean diets, you know, the diets where we have the ground provision, where we're using limited processed meats, where we're having lots of our fruits and vegetables. We're having our local fruit, our mangoes, our bananas. We're having lots of coconut water. We are also having like dried peas and beans. We're having our legumes. That was back in the day. But now we see that there is a shift away from those cultural, more traditional foods towards a westernized or an American diet. And with that, we're seeing lots of processed foods, specifically ultra processed foods, because most foods are processed. From the time we pick a mango from the tree, it has been processed. But what we are seeing is ultra processed food. So we're seeing the sausages and the corned beef and the deli meats, which pose a huge problem because these are high in nutrients of concern. So fat, cholesterol, salt, sugar. And not only that, but we're seeing easy access to these ultra-processed convenience foods. It's really quick and easy for you to just go into the store and pick something up. And what has happened is we've had these very fast-paced lifestyles developed. So persons don't have the time to go and cook a traditional meal from scratch. It's easier to either go and pick up some noodles, some cup noodles, go and pick up some mac and cheese rather than cook that pasta dish from scratch. It is easier for us to go to a certain place that sells fried chicken and pick that up instead of going home and turning some fungi. So we're seeing that shift away from our cultural traditional diets that are lower in sodium, higher in potassium, and then having lots of complex carbohydrates, and that as well is now leading to an increase in obesity, increase in NCDs, diabetes, high blood pressure.
Now that is interesting. Dr. Jarvis, children and this whole matter of overweight, obesity, I suppose in the various clinics when a parent delivers a baby and you do follow-ups, they have to go and get their checkups and that kind of things. I suppose that the doctors and nurses would tell them, you know, they need to watch this and that. But the fact that we are having an increase, that we are seeing an increase, is it that people are ignoring what the doctors are saying? Is it just a matter of convenience? What do you suppose may be the challenge there?
Well, as Charity would have rightly said, there has been a transition in terms of our nutritional intake, and it goes even beyond that, which we will come to, even in terms of from within the womb and even in preparations for pregnancy. But one of the things we recognize, we are very much eating nutrient poor but calorie dense foods. We're having more of a sedentary lifestyle. We're having limited to no physical activity, so that goes into sedentary lifestyle, but we're having more and more screen time. We recognize that person say, oh, I'm big boned, so my children are going to be big boned as well. But we recognize that in terms of genetic causes of obesity, that only accounts for 5% of cases of obesity in our children. So most of it is because of lifestyle. Do parents ignore what we say? Many times they do. Sometimes it's based on what is available financially. 5%. Many times it's what happens because of culture. So even though we do recommend exclusive breastfeeding for the first 6 months of life, I can tell you that even up to 2 weeks ago, I had a 1-month-old who was getting cornmeal porridge. And again, this is because of cultural interference, personal belief that breast milk may not be sufficient, is not adequate, is not filling my baby. And so many times substitutes are offered for satisfaction. Okay, so it's a lifestyle approach. Yes, there's genetic implications. Medications can contribute to obesity. Endocrine or hormonal disorders can contribute to obesity, but definitely for childhood obesity and even for the adults, by far, your nutritional intake as well as sedentary lifestyle are significant contributing factors to the rates of obesity.
Now, Dr. Stephen gave us some figures, global figures, just now. But how common is the problem in our region, this problem of overweight/obesity?
Okay, so when we look at it, we can look at it in several ways. The Healthy Caribbean Coalition would have given us a round estimate of 1 in 3 children in the Caribbean being overweight or obese. 1 in 3. When we look at a recent study, and it's recent enough, between the years of 2000 to 2010 in 7 Eastern Caribbean countries, between the ages of 0 to 4, the rates of obesity have doubled from 7.4% of these children being obese to 14.8% of our children 0 to 4 years old being obese. Just in 2003, Jamaica would have looked at children 7 to 8 years of age and looked at them again at 11 to 12 years of age. And we've seen that they would have had an increase in obesity rate just from 78 to 11 to 12 years of age, from 3.5% to 9.5%. Trinidad and Tobago, no different. 2001 and 2010 respectively, childhood obesity rates moved from 5% to 26%, with risk factors of hypertension, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease beginning to emerge. Charity has been a part of an awesome team at the Ministry of Health, looking at basically screening of children within our schools. We would have looked at 6 schools, screened 357 children right here in Antigua, ages ranging roughly from 12 to just above 18 years. 56% of them were female and 44% of them were male. And cumulatively, Obesity and being overweight accounted for 20% of these children, of which 11% were obese and 9% were overweight. So Dr. Greene, you can see that this is a problem that is prevalent not only internationally, but also within our Caribbean region and also within Antigua and Barbuda. We know that 56% of our children, when you look at them at the age of 2 years old, by the age of 35 years, 56% of them will be obese. So if this does not cause, if this is not a cause of concern, I'm not sure what else will be.
I mean, those figures are staggering. I mean, literally staggering. We have a problem. You know, I know that we had a challenge. I did not understand it was that serious.
It is a serious problem. And I might say that their targets. So when we look at the World Health Organization and striving to meet a target by 2025 of not increasing the rates of obesity and diabetes any further. So it's supposed to halt the rates where they are, right? So when we look at the values though, we're not halting. Instead, we are increasing. And so let me just pull up the value here. You're looking at us in 2010, the target for men should have been 9.9%. By 2025, the projected target is 17%. Women target in 2010, 23.6%. By 2025, 32.8%. When you look at children 5 to 19 years old, the target for 2010 was 8.4%. The projected target for 2025 is 16.8%. And Antigua and Barbuda has actually been flagged as being red, i.e. being high risk for our national obesity rates.
And can we talk to some of the effects? Now, some people may say, well, you know, I'm overweight, so what's the big deal? I'm obese, so what's the big deal? What Dr. Stevens did mention, you know, risk of hypertension, risk of heart disease and those kinds of things. But if I'm a child, well, let's say if I have a child who is obese, somebody may say, well, when the child gets older, they can lose weight. Does it have long-term effects when children are obese? Can it affect them later on in life, even if later on they may decide, you know, when they get to an age where they can make their own decisions, they decide to lose some weight? Would they still be affected by the obesity from when they're young?
Yes. So when we look at the complications of obesity, we can look at it from a direct complication or an indirect complication. Now, obesity can affect children basically from your head to your toe. So when you think about it, you can actually have raised pressure within the brain or within the skull that ultimately contributes to headaches, a very fancy term which we won't bother with today, and that can be very debilitating. We also have the whole issue of depression, again, because of body image issues, as well as because of bullying. When we look at the whole issue of the heart, Dr. Stevens would have appropriately mentioned the risk of hypertension and heart disease on a whole. And we know that fat in and of itself is going to accumulate in several areas within the body. When we look at sleeping, many parents will say, you know, my child snores. And they go on to even look as though they're going to stop breathing in the night. So obstructive sleep apnea is a recognized complication of obesity. Diabetes, yes. Fatty liver. So think about a person who drinks alcohol. They can have an accumulation of fat within the liver. Likewise, for the obese child, they too can have accumulation of fat within the liver. Gallstones, very real in our children as well. And as they grow older, reflux, so they get that sort of burning centrally in the chest. The bones in and of themselves, so bowed legs, they can have bowed legs or even knocked knees because of the excess weight, and even flattened feet. So looking down at your children's feet, the feet are flat and they can also have pain to the feet. So you recognize it actually impacts every organ of the body. And as they grow older, you have to look at the indirect causes of complications as well. So the indirect costs associated with obesity, increased absenteeism from school, and likewise loss of productivity. So it's a long-term effect. What will happen in childhood? Oh, I'm not noticing anything much, but trust me, by the age of 20 to even 35, you'll start reaping the rewards. But even now, we're seeing children with type 2 diabetes. More and more of our children are having type 2 diabetes, again, because of obesity.
And this is very concerning. So let's look at the diet, the modern diet. Ms. Dublin mentioned the American diets, but can you elaborate a little bit on this? How is this modern diet contributing to the problem?
So this westernized, Americanized diet, it tends to be high in several nutrients of concern. So the first thing would be fat. The foods tend to be very high in fat, very high, and therefore very high in calories. And those added calories are what can cause the weight to go on. So the food is often it's often fried. We have a lot of pastries as well. The foods, even if they're not fried, they may be high fat, so very cheesy, mac and cheese, that type of stuff. We also note sugary drinks. That's a big one. So sugary drinks account for most of the sugar that children are consuming. So yes, we have the cakes, the cookies, the ice cream, the sweets and the candies, yes, but sugary drinks are one. It's really easy for our children to drink 3, 4, 5, 6 box juices for the day. And the amount of sugar that one box juice contains can be equivalent or even surpass the amount that a soda might have in. And the reason I mention that is because a lot of parents will say, no, I don't give my child any sodas, but I'm not calling any names when they're giving them the box of juice. Going into the lunch kit, they're giving them juice at breakfast, or they're even giving them those chocolate teas. Not calling any names, but we know the powder, the chocolate that we're adding to the milk, and then we're adding more sugar on top of them. We're giving them the sweetened cereals. So the caloric intake really is where the problem is. And not just because of the sugar and fat, but also the portions and the serving sizes. So one thing I advocate for is please do not force your child to finish all of their food. We don't want any beating, we don't want any threatening, because what this does over time is it damages a child's natural fullness cues. So when children are full, they naturally stop. And we know that sometimes there may be distractions at mealtime. So they may be on the tablet, there may be other older children who are playing around. So at mealtimes, we really want to minimize distractions. So we give children time to really come to terms with what their hunger and fullness cues are. So that's another thing when it comes to the portions. We want to make sure that we're not serving them adult sizes. When they say they want more and we know that they've had an appropriate amount, we may want to take them to do something else. And if they are truly hungry in a few more minutes, we can give them something else. But it's something that we do want to keep in mind, especially when children are a bit younger, because we have more control over that when it comes to the food choices. And when they get older and they have their own buying and spending power, we know that things become a bit more challenging there.
Now, let me ask you another question here, because I noticed with my children, and my children are now adults, but when they were small, we made a choice not to use sugars with them. So we did not expose them to sugars. And what we observe now is that they have no attraction for sugary stuff, you know, so there's a function with all of these nice things, and they just don't have any desire or pull for those kind of sugary things. On the other hand, you often hear some children saying, oh, I don't want to eat vegetables. I have a very good friend who said, my children will not eat any fruit, any vegetables. How do we, because in your response just now, you mentioned something that was a kind of eye-opener to me. And when you said, you know, be careful that the children don't have these kinds of distractions. And the eye-opener was not that I didn't know that that was the case, but that when we're talking nutrition, it's not just what you eat, is understanding the dynamics of the distractions and the discipline. So it seems to be a whole chemistry that we're talking about here. But how do I get my children, if they are not inclined to eating their veggies and their fruits, how do I get them to develop the appetite for those things?
This is a very real question, and it's it's something that happens often. So there are 4 tips. I hope I remember them. There are 4 tips that I usually recommend. And the first question I ask parents is, do you eat vegetables? And let me tell you, 50% of the time, the parent will go, not really. So that's the first thing, ensuring that we're practicing what we preach. So when we're having our meal, we're not going to pick out the broccoli or the carrots because we don't like it. We're not going to speak negatively when it comes to vegetables, because children are going to mimic what they see. So that's the first thing. We want to ensure that we are good role models and we're setting good examples. The second thing is to get children involved. So ask them, what vegetables or fruits would you like to try? Like, what is on the definitely yes list, what's on the maybe list, what's on the no, we don't even want to go there. And then we incorporate more foods from the yes and the maybe, and then slowly we can try to incorporate some other foods from that no list. Additionally, what we want to do is we want to get creative with how we are offering the foods, the fruits and the vegetables. We do want to maybe incorporate them in smoothies. If we're doing meatloaves, meatballs, or peas balls, we want to incorporate it there. We want to do vegetable rice, make it really attractive for children, and also get children involved in the kitchen, have them participate in preparing the vegetables. That was the third. And the fourth thing is we want to ensure that we are repeatedly exposing children to fruits and vegetables. The reason for this is because children are more inclined to try foods that they are comfortable with and familiar with. And they're only going to be comfortable and familiar with these foods if they're being offered. And I tell clients and parents that it is going to be an exercise in patience. At first, it may feel like you're wasting your vegetables. So I usually advise that you just do a small amount, especially if the children are younger. Just them touching the vegetables is a step, even if they don't put it into their mouth. The next time you try it, they may put it into their mouth, but they may spit it out. That is perfectly fine, because eventually it may progress to a state where they're going to eat the vegetable and try it, and they may decide whether or not they like it. And especially when we're talking about the introduction of complementary foods, I want to encourage parents once again, and when we say complementary foods, those first set of foods that we're offering to younger children, we want to ensure that we are not giving up. So parents often try a new food once or twice and they'll say, the child doesn't like it. We want to continue offering that food once again for the exposure, and also because it may take a bit of time for that child to decide whether or not they truly like the food item.
Okay, very important tips there. Dr. Stephen, I want to come back to you a little bit, because we have been talking about childhood and the effects of obesity on children. But just to swing back, now, I know of a lot. I want to kind of bring this home. I'm aware that all kinds of people listen to this program. It's going to be on YouTube, so lots of people will see it. But the Seventh Adventist Church is a church that emphasizes healthful lifestyle. When you look among our congregation, though, it is evident that there are lots of overweight people. I'm not going to say obese. I could say that, but they would know what category they fall in. But there are lots of people who have more weight than they should have. Obviously, we are not heeding the call. Can you tell us again, Dr. Stevens, what am I doing to myself when I allow myself to become that heavy?
Okay, very good question, Pastor Greene. Before I go to that, I want to tell you that it is true. I started in private practice way back in 2014, I think, just a couple days of the week. And I was not seeing a lot of Seventh-day Adventists who have these NCDs. Now I'm seeing more. There were Seventh-day Adventists I saw way back then, but now I am seeing a difference, and persons who were coming to me were in their normal weight. Now they're definitely in the overweight or obese category. Because often as we get older, we tend to put on weight if we are not conscious, we are not taking heed to those lifestyle changes and sticking to them. So it's definitely a problem. It's definitely a problem. And now, Pastor Greene, I'm going to tell you, my mind have been racing so fast and of so many things I want to say. So I forgot your question. Can you repeat what you asked again?
I was asking what are people doing to themselves when they allow themselves to become?
That's right. That's right. Obesity is one of those diseases I mentioned earlier that is a complex disease, because that disease, greater than any other disease, can lead to several different diseases. Obesity have been known to cause different types of cancers. It has been linked with ovarian cancer, gallbladder cancer, pancreatic cancer. Obesity has been linked with infertility. So it's not just about the diabetes and the high blood pressure. It has been linked to cholesterol. And we know once we have a high increase in cholesterol, especially the LDL, which is the bad cholesterol, that predisposes a person to having coronary artery disease. That means the arteries around the heart, they get blocked. And that gives you a higher risk of having a heart attack, gives you a higher risk of having a stroke as well. So when it comes to obesity, it's like, for me in health, it's like that centerpiece that could branch out to just about any disease. And I also see the opposite, because when I have patients who are obese, and one young man I just want to talk about, not mentioning his name, but he came to me at 300 and something pounds, and now he lost 32 pounds, and I steadily saw the decrease in his blood pressure as he kept losing weight. And I've got to say, I want to shout out my dietitian, Charity, because I sent it to him. I sent him to her, and she has been very instrumental in assisting him. And when I saw him the other day, I was doing a dance with him because I was so happy. And I told him to continue to follow up, continue to follow the advice, because it is important. He is basically pulling himself away from that risk of stroke, of heart attack, and so many other things. And he's only 25, I think. No, I don't even think he's 25 yet. He's all early 20s. So obesity lends itself to numerous diseases. And if we lose weight, we can see that those complications are going to be decreasing.
Now, Dr. Greene, if I may before, because Dr. Stevens made such an important point as it relates to cancers, because when persons hear cancer, there is sort of perk up, right? But one of the other things that we know is very topical these days is also sudden death, okay? In 2017, 4.7 million people died prematurely because of obesity and its related complications.
That's right.
This is 4 times the number of deaths because of road accidents worldwide. And it is 5 times the number of deaths due to HIV/AIDS in 2017. So the whole issue of sudden death, remember that the heart can go into what we call atrial fibrillation. It's just doing this, right? So we're seeing lots of sudden deaths around the place. Many are speaking about the vaccine, many are speaking about other things. But let us not forget that obesity contributes to the rates of sudden death. And our rates of obesity are skyrocketing. No longer are we doing this in terms of trajectory. We're almost doing a straight line.
I trust that the folks who are listening are heeding this counsel. That's very important. I wanted to ask about the impact, the economic impact. Now, the nations around, when you have that kind of burden on healthcare, it must be a concern. And I listened to a news item some time ago. I don't remember the country. I'm sorry, I don't remember the country. But they were enacting a law that they were going to be charging parents for their obese children. They were saying that if they found parents with obese children, the children were going to be charged, and they were considering it a criminal offense. Now, that may be going really far, but isn't it time that our government begin to take more drastic measures? You know, I pass by certain schools and I see trays on the outside of the school with all kinds of sweet things there. Can we not do something about the attraction that we are presenting to our boys and girls in terms of what they eat in, what they can so easily access at that young age?
Excellent point. There are definitely priority areas that have to begin not only within our homes and within our schools and the different franchises, but even through the interest of the government. It means that several trade and fiscal policies have to be put in place. What is the associated cost with eating healthy? It really should not be more costly to eat healthy than it is to, eat in an unhealthy manner. When you think about a certain franchise, and again, I'm not going to call any names like Charity, said she wouldn't call any names, but it's so easy to get a combo for $20-something. But if I'm trying to buy some fruits, vegetables, some tofu, etc., it is so expensive. So again, looking at things like having taxes associated with your sugary sweetened beverages, for example, looking at marketing even. I'm having advertisements on the TV that my children are seeing and their mouths are watering after seeing this big juicy burger. What am I able to bring into the country? Nutrition literacy. Many of us, we go to the supermarket and we're unable to interpret or read the labels. So understanding how to read food labels is important. Having front of package labels where it can just say low in salt, high in fat. So even if I can't read or interpret a label, I can see a picture that suggests that this is not healthy for me. School-based policy. So our sugar sweetened beverages should not be allowed in schools. I'm sure you would have all heard about St. Lucia and other countries that have strived to institute the no SSB policy in schools. What the vendors are able to sell, very close to where I work, and I'm sure you know along that stretch, I work at the Celeste Medical Center, you can access fried chicken for breakfast right in front of the schools, fried dumpling, pancakes, all of these things. In schools, we have Eat Whatever You Want Day. We reward our children. If you do well on the quiz, we're going to have popcorn day, ice cream day, cake day. Vacation Bible School. Do we have fruits offered, or do we more so have ice cream and cake and sandwiches being offered? So again, it's going to go through school and community-based interventions, having the necessary ball courts, etc., to do exercise. And again, education is key. You have to educate and empower your families so that they can feel free to make the right choices.
Now, last week, Charity mentioned, we were talking about hypertension and that kind of thing. And one of the things Charity mentioned last week was Vienna sausages, right? So we did call a name last week, but, and sometimes I think we need to. But a lot of people, well, and I remember this because somebody related that to me during the week as they were commenting on this program, because it is so easy. There's so many persons I know. When I go to the supermarket, one of the things I kind of do is to look to see what people are purchasing. And when you're at the checkout counter and you see the kinds of things that people are purchasing, and you say to yourself, wow, here we go again. But it is so easy. There are lots of people who will argue, this is what I can afford, based on my salary, my income, my circumstances, this is what I can afford. And I pick up a few boxes of, cans of Vienna sausages, and, you pull the flip there, and the children like these things. They taste salty, they taste nice, and they eat them. And so we seem to be continuing along the wrong path. And I rather like the suggestion there, Dr. Bell Jarvis, that it should not be more expensive for me to eat healthy than for me to eat unhealthy. And I have a concern because when I want to buy healthy stuff in the supermarkets and the marketplaces, they cost an arm and a leg. And the processed things, and I always say, why is it that the natural thing is more expensive than the processed thing? And you don't have to do as much to the natural thing. It's kind of upside down. But let's move on anyway. We don't have much time. We have 12 more minutes. And I want to ask Dr. Jarvis this question, because, as we talk about childhood obesity and the concerns about the diet, does the mother's diet during pregnancy impact the likelihood that a child can become obese?
Yes, it does. And so what you've touched there, Dr. Greene, is the whole concept of what is called metabolic programming. So even outside of what a mother eats, even her weight and her BMI at pregnancy is important. The associated chronic diseases or the lifestyle diseases that she has also contributes to the metabolic programming theory. And so a mom who has an increased BMI, who also has diabetes and hypertension, is naturally setting her child up for a life of likely obesity. Likewise, her diet within pregnancy. We always say culturally, oh, you're eating for two. Can you go out and feel that craving? I need pizza. I need that 3-letter franchise. I need this and that. But what we don't recognize is that the diet that mommy has in pregnancy also programs the diet that the child will have. We know that even in terms of the cells within the body, the pancreas, that organ that is responsible for releasing insulin, all of these organs and body parts can get bigger just simply based on the mom's underlying diagnosis of diabetes in pregnancy. We know, well, we are suggesting that even the flavor of the amniotic fluid, that's the fluid that surrounds the baby in the womb, is tailored by the mother's diet. And so now when the baby is born, after having been in that environment and metabolically programmed, and by metabolically, how are you going to be processing things within your body? You have been programmed, and therefore you will continue to be at risk. Charity mentioned it well. What if you look at a child's plate, it often mirrors what the parent's plate also looks like. So you have parental feeding, another contributing factor to obesity, because whatever you have generational eating, you find out whatever great grandma eats, mommy eats, child eats. And so that's why you have that vicious cycle of being big boned, because the diet is the same. Okay, so metabolic programming is real. And so before you even decide to get pregnant, see a physician. Am I at my ideal weight for my height? My long-standing conditions, my high blood pressure, my diabetes, are they under control? Is this the right time to get pregnant? Or should I strive to get under better control and delay my pregnancy until a later date? And then while you're pregnant, pay attention to the things that you eat and even your physical activity.
Now, another thing that a Charity mentioned was sweetened cereals. You go to the supermarket and there is a whole long, maybe sometimes a complete aisle with all flavors, all kinds of cereals. How do we advise parents on the kinds of cereals they should be giving their children?
So this one is really tricky. And the reason for this comes back to a point that Dr. Bell Jarvis mentioned, which is the marketing. Because if you look at the cereals, they're very pretty. We have lots of different cartoon characters. Some of them may even have characters from movies. There's a certain brand that has a tiger. And also we may also see that these cereals on the backs, they have games and they have other things that will entice children to purchase them. So it starts there. So it comes back to labeling. So front of package warning labels, that is something that the region has been fighting for and lobbying for several years now. if we remove all of these pretty characters, it makes the cereals less enticing to children. Because I know it is difficult when parents, especially when they bring the children to the supermarket and the children are pleading for that specific cereal. It's very difficult for you to say, no, you're having this one. And when you bring this one home, the child doesn't want it. So what I generally recommend is that we go towards, we can do one of two things. We can use plain cereal, and we can make it a little bit nicer by using fruit, fresh fruit or dried fruit. We can use nuts and seeds on it, make it really attractive for children. What we can also do is we can read the labels. I remember that I gave everyone an assignment last week for them to flip the labels and for them to look at the amount of salt. So your homework for this week will be for you to flip the label and look at the amount of sugar. So the sugar we're looking for, it's going to say added sugar or just sugar. You're looking at that. It's going to be in grams. You're going to divide the grams by 4, and that will give you the number of teaspoons. And you're going to use that information to make an informed decision. So we're not just going to have the information and store it in our heads. We're going to use it. You're going to use that information to help you choose a cereal that is lower in sugar. So those are the 2 suggestions I have. And also remember, all of these different pretty fancy foods that are not the best for us, that may be high in calories, low in nutrients. I'm not saying that you can never have them again, that you need to completely remove them from your diet, but that you need to be more mindful about how often you have them, how often you offer them to your children, and how much of it you're consuming when you do have it.
Now, I'm here thinking. You just said, before I forget this, that if you divide the number of grams by 4, we get the number of teaspoons. However, something I've observed, some labels will say sugar, and then they will say what is it, corn syrup, and those kinds of things. So there are different names for sugars. Can you highlight some of the other variants so that people can be aware?
Sure. So 2 things. So when we look at the label, we have 2 different pieces of information, or pertinent pieces of information when it comes to nutrition on the label. We have the ingredients list. So in the ingredients list, as you rightly say, it may not just say sugar. It may say high fructose corn syrup. It may say maltose. It may say fructose. It may say sucrose. Usually anything that ends in "ose" is going to be a sugar. So that's an easy way for you to remember it. So that is going to be on the ingredients list. If we look at the food label or the nutritional label, to be correct, if we look at the nutrition label, that's where we're going to see carbohydrates broken down. We may see total carbohydrates followed by total sugars, depending on the package. And then after that, we'll see either just sugars or added sugars. That added sugar is what we want to pay attention to, because we know, according to the WHO, when it comes to added or free sugars, so even the sugars that are in your, it may not be soda or food drink, but like a 100% fruit juice, we need to pay attention to those sugars as well, because they are free sugars. So when it comes to added or free sugars, WHO recommends that we have no more than 5 to 10% of our daily caloric intake coming from those sugars. For children, we usually advise that they have no more than 6 teaspoons of sugar per day. So if we have a drink that contains 20 grams of sugar and we divide that by 4, we know that it is going to contain 4 teaspoons of sugar. So that is, that's about a third, 2/3. So that's going to be 2/3 of the amount of sugar that they should be having for the day. So that is how we really want to break it down and bring it into context.
Very well, very useful information. You are giving us things that can guide us in practical things in our homes. Because our time is moving quickly by, I want to get to this. If I am overweight or obese, what kind of lifestyle changes do I need to take? Dr. Stevens, if I come to you and I am overweight, what are you going to tell me? You're going to send me to charity and tell me, let her work on a diet for me. I guess that's fine. Yes.
Yeah, that's one of the things I'm going to tell you.
Uh-huh.
I often give them some brief information just in case they don't get to charity soon enough. So I would often talk to them about their diet, many of the things that Charity have spoken about, but just not as in-depth. Of course, you have to take in consideration the time for the consultation as well. So diet is very, very important. And for me, that is the number one, because if we look at the overall lifestyle changes that we're supposed to make, 80% of what we eat contributes to our weight, right? 80%. The 20%, that is your physical activity. So for example, if you decided, you know what, I don't want to exercise, but I still want to lose weight. If you do not exercise, but you just watch what you eat and follow the dietary advice, you will lose weight and you will be in good health. You would not be at ideal, but you will be in good health. So we definitely need the dietary changes. You need the exercise. Oftentimes we make a lot of excuses about why we cannot exercise and why we cannot walk or go to the gym or what have you. But when we get sick, we cannot make an excuse to go to the hospital or go to the doctor's office, because that pain is going to be real, whether it's for a headache because of hypertension or a urinary tract infection because of diabetes. So if we make the time now to make those lifestyle changes, when it comes to exercise, there's so many options. And I always advise my patient, pick something that you really love. It could be dancing, it could be jogging, it can be walking, it can be swimming, it can be hiking. Whatever you choose, just be really consistent with it, because consistency is key as well. So you have your diet, you have your exercise, and you also have, if you already have those NCDs, those diabetes, high blood pressure, it's also very important that you see your doctor regularly and you take your medications. And if you do that, you can be on a better path to living a more healthy life, because having the disease in and of themselves is not what is so bad. What is so harmful is the complications that you develop from these diseases. And once we start having complications, it becomes very expensive, both on the individual, the family, the society, and the government on a whole. It is very alarming to me when I look at the amount of money a country spends on medication. Because when you go to medical benefit and you have a medical benefit prescription that has 6, 7, or 8 prescriptions, and persons argue, well, I pay my medical benefits a month, so I need to get my medications free. Sometimes one medication that you're getting in like 2 to 3 months, that wipes out your year of your payments for medical benefits, because the medications are very expensive. And so it is right when we say a healthy nation is a wealthy nation, because when we have to spend all this money in medication, we can put them to having a court, better sidewalks, so we can have bicycle and walking. Lots of areas do not have sidewalks. We could really do with those. I'm sure Dr. Bell and Charity can think about a number of things that they could approach the government for, to give them money to put things in place that would benefit the health of our children. But we can't get that because a lot of the money is going to medications. So if you decide individually, myself and my family, we are going to try our best to be healthy so that we can contribute to a healthy nation, that is going to go a long way. It burdens me, it breaks my heart when I see healthcare workers like myself and other people just gaining weight and becoming fat and putting on all this weight and then medication. We have to live by example as well. So we can't come on here and talk to you about living a healthy lifestyle when we ourselves are not doing it. So I really trust and hope that these weeks that we're spending on NCD, the information won't fall on deaf ears, but that we will go out and we'll use the information and that we'll be really practical about it.
Guess what? Our time is up. But I do want to ask Dr. Jarvis this question. Dr. Jarvis, they breastfed is best fed, they say. And if my wife, now my wife is past that stage, but if my wife has a baby and then she has to go out to work after 3 months, how do we breastfeed under those circumstances?
Excellent question. And yes, breast is best. I am still a very proud breastfeeding mother, and my daughter is going to be 2 years in 2 months and still breastfeeding, going strong. So yes, breast is best for the first 6 months. Exclusive breastfeeding, no need for water, juice, teas, anything else. Expressing milk is something that is so important, so useful, and something that is often underestimated. A mom preparing to go back to work, in our culture, you often hear, okay, I'm going to introduce the formula because I'm going out to work and I'm not going to be able to breastfeed. If you're able to express your breast milk and store it within the freezer, appropriately labeled by date, then the breast milk that is expressed will then be able to be offered to your little one via the bottle or via cup or via syringe, whatever option you so desire. But one of the things that is also important, the more you use it, the more you get. And so it can't be that you're going through your 8-hour job and not expressing throughout the day. It's very important, therefore, that employers within their facilities has an expression room where mommy can go and feel comfortable and express her milk every 2 to 3 hours, or as her breast become engorged, just as if she were home feeding her baby. She can walk with a blanket that smells like the baby, a picture of the baby, things that will help her milk to let down, just hearing her baby cry. Express while at work so that she can then store, and that breast milk can often be given. In other settings where a baby may be born early or born too soon, or premature babies. In other settings, so not in Antigua and Barbuda at this time, our nearest Caribbean counterpart is likely Trinidad and Tobago, you have breast milk banks, right? Where breast milk from another mother is expressed, is stored, and is available for your baby. Again, culturally, that's something completely different, right? But just like how you have a blood bank and you can receive blood from another individual, you also have breast milk banks, because the power of breast milk is so important. And so, you know, it has significant value that the importance of having a breast milk bank cannot be underestimated. So, Dr. Greene, those are the ways that your wife, speaking, can express and continue to feed. Daddy or whoever is caring for the baby can continue to offer breast milk. And I have to offer here that we're seeing declines in our rates. Between 2018 to 2020, 85% of our babies are exclusively breastfed undischarged from hospital, right here in Antigua and Barbuda. At the 6-month mark, based on our review, 25%, and this is data from 2018 in August to about January 2020, 25% of babies are exclusively breastfed by the time they reach the 6 months. Falling rates of breastfeeding are highly associated with increased rates of obesity. I know time is out. Dr. Stevens could have given her waist, so I'm going to give my waist too. 5, 2, 1, 0. 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. That is key. When you look at your plate for lunch, half of the plate should be vegetables. A quarter should be a protein and a quarter your starch. You're going to hear my little one in the background. 2, no more than 2 hours of screen time. 1 hour of physical activity per day. And we're speaking to our children here. And 0, no sugary sweetened beverages. Children who are under the age of 2 do not need juice. So the Gerber juice and so on that you're buying, forget it. There is no added sugar or juice required for that one who is less than 2 years old. And sleep, can I say sleep? Our children should sleep. If you're 4 to 12 months, you should be getting at least 12 to 16 hours. 6 to 12 years, 9 to 12 hours, and we'll cut it off here for today because we're 4 or 5. We need a part 2, Dr. Greene. We need a part 2 and a part 3 because obesity is a big topic and there's so much we didn't touch.
Yeah, I hear you. We will work on it, but definitely there is so much that we need to do. It's a pity that we have to end here, but that's how it is. So next week we're going to be talking about heart disease. And we want we're going to have a cardiologist with us next week. We want to encourage you to join us next week. It's going to be very important, very meaningful, because this issue of NCDs, we have to take an active role. Individuals must rise up and say, I'm going to fight this. That's all the time we have for now. Thank you all so much. Until next week, may God bless you.